Alright, now today's video is going to be a little different because a few people have asked me to basically leave religion out of it, even though this country was founded on Christianity. I'm going to talk about peak oil again because gas prices have been going up, and a lot of the socialists have been blaming it on finite, what they call finite oil. But I'm going to talk to you about what's really going on scientifically with peak oil, with the theory of peak oil. Let's start out with a little sort of profile of part of the Earth. The Earth is much bigger than that. Of course, that's just a little cross section. You got an oil well here. I'm not going to draw the whole thing. That's just a representation. You got your pool of oil down below. Let's say this one's 5,000 feet down. I think the deepest well they ever drilled was 35,000 feet under some seawater. Most of them are shallower than that, but anyway, what the people, the peak oil theorists like to talk about is that when you drill into the well, into the reservoir for the first time, it's under a lot of pressure, and it causes your gushers. There's a man here getting rained on by a gusher. It's coming out under a lot of pressure, and you got the high flow rates initially. And what they're saying with the peak theory, I'll make a little graph here, is that over time, so you start out with the high pressure, production builds, reaches a point where the pressure can no longer force out the oil to keep the flow rate steady, and it goes down. They call that the peak. And they also say you have to inject a bunch of stuff into the well to maintain the pressure even up to that point. They're putting stuff. It's like taking a soda bottle, and when all the fizz is gone out of it, you inject more fizz into it to keep like you poke a hole in the side of it, and the soda will keep spraying out. That's the general theory. So on a purely scientific level, I can understand that an oil well, any given oil well, will peak. And you take a whole bunch of oil wells together, different parts of the world, you got the same thing, general thing going on. They all go through their peak pressure cycle. I can understand that. But the problem is, what these people aren't talking about is what's going on about 50,000 feet below the Earth's surface. You got a whole big reservoir of oil that's never going to go away because it's coming from the center of the Earth. Now, the scientific term for that is abiotic oil. It has never been disproven as a concept. See what's going on in some of these wells. Some of these wells have little feeder streams coming up from the abiotic reservoir. Like this well right here, maybe it doesn't have a feeder stream. It's going to dry up. It's going to go through the peak pressure cycle. But these other wells, they get fed. Now see, I've been learning about this. I'm not just some backwoods hillbilly making stuff up. That's what people don't understand. I've been learning about this stuff now. Abiotic oil is still an active scientific theory. And a scientific theory, which I also learned recently, is not just some guy rattling off numbers off the top of his head. It means something that makes a lot of sense and has had some thought put into it. So anyhow, all over you got this trillions and trillions and quadrillions and quintillions of barrels of oil 50,000 feet and farther underneath the Earth, and it's replenishing certain wells. The key reason why peak oil is a myth is because once they find the wells that are being replenished, they can go back. They're always trying to re-drill old wells by injecting stuff into them. Sometimes they inject CO2 even, for all you global warming paranoids. But if they go back and they find all these wells that have these little feeder streams coming into them, and they re-drill them, it's all about optimism. It's the American way. They re-drill all these oils. They're going to find out these wells will never dry up. See, Now, I've gone through an entire presentation without mentioning the Bible, but this country was founded on biblical principles, and one of the biblical principles that really matters forget that. I'm going to draw the Bible. This is a holy book. One of the biblical principles, let's have a tassel or two coming out of it there, bookmark, is that the power of faith is what drives man. The power of faith is what's going to drive man to go back to all these old wells and find new wells that tap into this unlimited reservoir. Now, I don't come to you as a total humble man who's been bowled over by scientific logic. There's one other thing I was going to go over. Yeah, that was it. I just remembered. There's a man called Lindsey Williams. He was a preacher at one time. He overheard a conversation about a place called Gull Island in Alaska. I don't know exactly what it looks like. We'll just draw an island here. I'll call that Gull Island. Little seagulls flying around it like that. And Lindsey Williams found out, I think it was back in the 80s or maybe the 70s, he overheard this man talking about 200 years worth of oil underneath Gull Island, and he was right about that. You know, why would the foreman lie about it? They were talking about the wells were being capped off, and there's a theory that the government capped them off to artificially raise the price of oil. You know, now they're talking about drilling Anwar, and they got the Alaska pipeline and all that. But underneath this Gull Island, what I'm thinking is Gull Island is a direct conduit into this abiotic oil like we've never seen. Big old pipe going under the island. And that 200 years is probably more like 200,000 years, or you could even call it infinite time. So I suggest everybody, speaking from a strictly scientific viewpoint, should study the writings of Lindsey Williams in Gull Island, Alaska. You know, gas is expensive right now, but once the mainstream scientific community, liberals, whatever you want to call them, because most scientists are liberal. Here's what a typical scientist looks like. He's got the spectacles like that. Usually got some kind of beard like that. Kind of scruffy looking. Maybe a little long hair like that. That's your typical geo-liberal, whatever you want to call it, scientist. But once we get these guys indoctrinated with the abiotic oil theory and send a couple of them up to Gull Island to do some exploratory uncapping and re-drilling, we're going to find out what's really going on. We're going to end our dependence on foreign oil for good, and then we can tackle that global warming nonsense.